All right, guys. I apologize for the wait. We were we were shooting a bunch of ideas at each other in the background. So I apologize for anybody that was waiting. Um, and I started up a little late because had a choir concert tonight.
Hey, priorities, man.
Dude, choir concert was awesome. I got to see my niece, got to see my daughter. It was great.
Cool.
I
But
was
that's
happy
awesome.
to see it.
I love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you had a little more free time to actually work with me.
Definitely, yeah. I've been wanting to hop back on here for a while now, so I just figured that like the time was right, and I had the free time, so let's do it.
Well, and I've had one guy specifically, Zachary Kim is his name, and he's like, "When are you gonna have Joey Gage back on again?" He goes, "He's the he's the one guest that we've been wanting to have back on for a while." What's going on, Blue Eyed Diva? Hope you're doing well. But in case anybody hasn't met Joey Gage, this is and then Zachary Kim pops in. Sure enough,
Oh.
and so I haven't had Joey on in a while. Joey, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about yourself. Yeah, feel free.
Yeah. So my name's Joey, Joey Gage. I produce music under the artist name Amun Raja. If you want to look me up on Instagram, that's AMUNRAJA, Amun Raja. But yeah, I produce music. I play handpan. But I'm also a writer. I do all sorts of different stuff. You know what I mean? I just like to enjoy kind of every aspect of life, and I don't really compartmentalize my life. Like my spirituality kind of bleeds into my music and all the rest of my life as well. So, but yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. Kind of just.
Well, and I think me and you connected on that like level a long time ago because like me and you grew up in the same town and didn't know each other.
Right.
And I just thought it was the wildest thing. I was like, how do I not know this guy? I was like, we probably hang out with the same circle of people. And he was like, well, yeah, kind of a little bit. Like there's a little bit of overlap, but I'm surprised I hadn't heard of you sooner. And yeah, it was great actually getting to meet you. Like especially when you've come over to my house before.
Yeah.
I
That was
actually
pretty cool.
do enjoy hanging out with you. You're a good person,
Yeah,
and
I can
I
say the same
like
about you, man. Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate that. But more than anything, I like that you'll dig into these philosophies with me and these ideas with whether we're talking about religion, spirituality, or anything along those lines, because I think they're all kind of interchangeable at a certain level.
Yeah, they're all
Um,
interwoven.
and I think that brings us to tonight's topic, which is the construction that you've been working on lately, the project you got going on.
So, well, the main thing that I just finished up was releasing my book, which is called The Arrow's Path. So it's basically all about different spiritual modalities, different world religions, the parallels between them, and kind of integrating that into like a modern life, as well as just a couple of my different experiences, like down that path. I talk about shamanism and spirit journeying. I even talk about psychedelics, and we'll get into that. I'm going to read a little bit from it. So, but here's what it looks like. It's the Arrow's Path. There's been speculation as to whether this apostrophe is in the correct place, but let me tell you that I can argue for its placement right there at the end. Yeah, right there.
Hold on, I'm going to pull you on big screen here. There
Some
you
people
go.
would say it should be over here, W apostrophe S. Well, I'll have you know, I'm old school with it. So we're going the British route, I suppose. I was told that this is the British way to write it, so that's fine.
Well, I
But
mean, if we're going to go English, might as well go with the old English rather than the new English.
right, yeah, old. That's old with an E, I presume, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so I mean, let's just get into it, I suppose.
Oh, hold on. I got a couple questions already coming in the chat. So
right
I
on.
told you Zachary Kim wanted to come back on, and he does this thing with all of my guests. He does character association with all of my guests. I think I'm Simba, Jody is Nala. Like I think there's a Little Mermaid. There's an Ariel. There's a whole list of like Disney characters, and all of these characters assigned with people, including like Mowgli and like
Oh, okay.
everybody. So Zachary Kim was wondering if he could associate you with a character.
I would be honored. Yeah.
All right. There's your answer, Zachary Kim.
Yeah. No, I would be honored. Absolutely.
Because he's usually got one in the chamber when he asks. And
Okay.
he's been asking for, God, he's been asking for a while. So let us know if you get one, Zachary.
Yeah, go ahead, shoot. I'm ready. That's
But
awesome.
what can you tell us about the book without giving us? Whoa, that's a different one. Okay, he said Steve from Blue's Clues.
Oh, I love that. That is a real honor, actually. Okay.
All right.
I can go with that.
I mean, kind and caring guy like Steve can't go wrong.
No. Yeah, he is a role model, and I mean, to be fair, I guess I watched him growing up, so it
Might have rubbed off a little bit.
might have rubbed off a little bit. I mean, like I'm a dad too, so like I think that probably has worked itself like really into my character, and honestly, like it has helped me just build upon like really being more patient and like practicing what I preach.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so to talk about the book without giving too much of it away, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's a supposition of all of these different extractions from holy text, from sacred texts. So I'm
Well,
talking about different quotes from the Bible, from the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching from Taoism, talking about like the Zen platform of the Sixth Patriarch. I think I even quote like the Vajra Sutra, the Diamond Sutra. So I mean, we're getting deep into Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Christianity, and we're comparing these texts and showing the parallels and how these messages are being echoed and repeated. And not so much that they're being copied, but that this knowledge has been being spread and that it's a message overall of love and of like brotherhood, you know what I mean? And it's, I think that it's just, and I get into this, I talk about karma being the light of the world and how karma will always, even if it disappears from one spot in the world, it'll spring up somewhere else. So there's always this love that's like echoing and reverberating throughout the universe. So it's kind of about that. It's about like the fundamental nature of the universe in a way. If we try to
tell people about the cover picture, because I think that'll actually explain it a little bit too.
Okay. So this is actually an image that I generated, an AI generated image, if you will. And it was what is it, prompt? The prompt was Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, all one God. And then we ran with it. And this was my favorite one that I got. And yeah, I that's really what I think that we're getting at here is that my fundamental understanding of Christianity is completely different than what most people consider Christianity. And I would consider myself a Christian because I'm a follower of Christ, but I'm also a Buddhist, and I also have practiced shamanic spirit journeying with a rattle and a blindfold. But I still consider myself a Christian because when Jesus is talking about like only through Christ, right? And when he says only through me, keep in mind, he's always teaching through parable. He tells us specifically he's always teaching in parables. So there's no reason to take him literally. So when he says, only through me can you get to heaven, and when he says, I am, he's confirming that that's within all of us. When he says Christ, he's talking about the God within, right? And I specifically talk about that in my book. It would be interesting to rephrase the Bible and write a new version of the Bible and see just how much sense it would still make if you were to use the term God within when they're referring to Christ. Because, I mean, that's exactly the philosophy that he's talking about. When you take the Lord's Prayer, he's talking about God's will from above coming down here. Our Lord, right? Our Father. He's calling the higher being. He's calling the oversoul, if you will. And then he says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done as it is in heaven. So again, he's manifesting from above down below. And really, I think that that's what a lot of these philosophies get to, and that's like true magic. And if you want to look at something like from a Wiccan standpoint, where you're making changes in the spiritual world that manifest changes in the physical, that's magic. So the Lord's Prayer could be broken down into so many different ways and be relevant across so many different philosophies and religions. And I really think that Jesus condensed teachings from Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and brought them to a people in the Middle East and rephrased it for Jews. And they weren't totally ready for it, of course, and there was some fighting, right? But I think that he presented it in the way that he could. And maybe some of the verbiage, was confusing, but he's teaching in parable. Like I said, he tells us that. So.
I got a couple questions for you about that.
Yeah.
And Blue Eyed Diva said, "You're so right, Joey." Making the connections between Christianity and some of the older ideas is. We were talking about this offline. So with the first one, did you seek out the beginning root knowledge of where all of this evolved from? Like, do you look back to like the Sumerians? Like we were talking about offline paganism and Druids, and how that's most of our holidays when you're talking about Christianity are kind of based on Druid and pagan ideas. Right. And usually with the seasons as well. It's actually with the winter, the summer solstice, as well as the fall and
the autumnal and the vernal equinox, the spring equinox as well. Yeah. So absolutely.
But I didn't know if it was. Did you stop at like the paganism, or did you find root sources that were older than that that carried on all the way down through paganism into Christianity today?
I mean, I do actually talk about this as well as methodology when it's broken down, but predating paganism, and I guess it's an essential part of paganism, but also predating it, because what we have in paganism is a structured religion, and we have ceremony, right? So when you have ritual is a magical act, and the outcome might not always be the same. A ceremony is technically a magical act, but it's a recitation of something, and the outcome is always the same. So it's a difference between ritual and ceremony. So to me, that I'm straying slightly from the topic here. Rephrase the question for me, my friend.
Basically, I'm wondering if what roots were you looking at that reach back farther than paganism?
So to tie all this into a neat little knot, basically, if you want to look at the structured side of paganism, that is a religion. But what we have that predates religion and is more so tied to ritual and personal experience and divine interaction is shamanism. So shamanism is a personal journey that you take. There's no mediator between you and spirit, between you and source, right?
It's very internal.
It is. In some of these shamanic cultures, there would be like a village shaman or a tribal shaman, right? Somebody that was specifically gifted and had one foot in this world, one foot in the other. But really, when it comes down to shamanic culture, it was, and shamanic tradition, shall we say, like core shamanism, the practice is different. The practice is that of going internally rather than, like I said, ceremonially reciting a prayer. You're practicing a spirit journey, which you're accessing basically an altered state of consciousness, the delta state, the theta wave state. The theta wave state is between alpha and delta. So the theta wave state is basically like a visionary dream state. And when you access it, it's kind of dreamlike. So when you're spirit journeying, it is almost like you're inducing a dream. And I'm gonna get my doggy away from my phone cable. So when you spirit journey, it's like you're accessing like a dream world. Yeah. And actually, it was a kind of a universal core belief. So in core shamanism, it's a term used in a lot of modern shamanism with shamanic practitioners. Core shamanism is like the universal beliefs, right? So there are several universal beliefs, and that is one of them that's upheld by several cultures across the world.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting with shamanism that they have that, because I also see it on a a paranormal level where it's actually like basically they they call it dead time if you're talking about like a Ouija board, or if you're talking about like an out of body experience, or um, astral projecting. It's usually between the point of awake and asleep, and
Okay.
there's
Okay.
this point where you're most
It's a
vulnerable.
it's a trance state. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when we come to shamans, people usually think of like Indian shamans or older shamans like that. When you actually had these seers that were in Greek and Roman times as well, they would look
Yeah.
into like I've heard of them looking into chambers of gas and some kind of like gases being released. I've seen them look into like water and draw something from that.
The
And like
water reflections and reflections off of curved surfaces. I believe that's called caltripmancy or something of that nature. There's all sorts of different types of divination that come out of that specific locale, which is interesting. I mean, and different types as well. I mean, you're talking divination with spilled blood. But then, yeah, when you get more into like the druidic traditions, that's where you're seeing like the reading of tea leaves and things like that.
Chase said scrying.
Scrying, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So crystal scrying, I have had vivid experiences crystal scrying, but admittedly I was tripping on acid at the time. So
I mean, but I've had this discussion with people, regardless of if it's acid or if it's meditation or if it's mushrooms. And I think this is just for men because I've talked to a lot of women about this, and they're just they have way better intuition than most guys do.
they do.
And I only reach that point of intuition where I'm either at a point of meditation or hallucination or something like that, where I can actually take in more things.
For
Like I'm
me,
more
what really
perceptive.
helps, I think, is the crystals. You gotta have big crystals.
Yeah. I mean, I guess size matters. I guess that's where I'm lacking. All I got is salt crystals. So
Oh, you got some halite over there. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to keep away the negative ions.
Nice. Yeah, that's good, dude. No, you're doing right. You're doing right.
It's about all I know.
No, that's too funny.
But so back to Jesus and
Back
the
to
misinterpretation of his message. What do you
Right.
think about Jesus's lost years and him possibly traveling through the Middle East, also in Asian communities as well? I think they've talked about him being in the Himalayas at one point.
Issa, under the name Issa.
Yeah, different name, but
Now
almost
Issa has
seemed to
a
be the
tomb.
same figure.
Issa has a tomb specific.
Yeah.
So Issa didn't.
So does Jesus. He wasn't in there either.
It's true. It's true. We don't know. So, no, it is very interesting. The Issa thing has been discredited by a lot of different sources, but I think that the people that are discrediting the Issa story are also not really like credible themselves. So, like, to me, if you do the research, here's the issue. That monastery, that Tibetan Buddhist monastery, we all know what happened to Tibet, okay? The scrolls are fucking gone. They're gone.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
what are you supposed to do? You can't go there and ask the monks to see the scrolls anymore. They're gone. There's no evidence. There's no proof.
Yeah. Well, and most stories back then were verbal anyway. Like look at the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's a game of telephone.
That is true, but the Buddhist monks were scribes, so they notarized everything, and there were copies of scrolls. So when a Buddhist monk attained a certain rank in monkhood, he would actually have to transcribe a different scroll from, I believe, from Sanskrit into Pali, which is what they spoke there. So yeah, they would have to transcribe from the original Sanskrit into a different language, and it had to be approved by the older monks. So it's a whole different process. So they did actually record everything, and there were supposedly scrolls and recordings of this Issa. And it correlated to the Jesus story,
Mhm.
which is really interesting.
I wanna let you field this one because apparently there's a diehard Christian in the chat, and I thought this would be a fun question to address, or I guess it's a statement. It said nothing more than hocus pocus brought to us by the enemy. See you later. I'll pray for you all daily. I pray for you all daily. That's kind of what we're talking about, boss man, is how the stuff that you read today, whether it's Christian, Judaism, Catholicism, all of them have roots. And whether we want to talk about flood stories, whether we want to talk about a single Messiah, whether we want to there's a lot of things that we can point to that are a lot older than Christianity.
I mean, we can talk about the creation stories and similarities between the Norse mythology and the Christian and Judaic Genesis. There's so much.
I have a guest on today. I'm not sending out links to everybody. I apologize, guys. Maybe towards the end of the show, if you guys are on a little bit later and Joey wants to take questions or something like that, you guys are more than welcome to. If you guys hang out for a little bit, but I do want to cover this book and get through some of the ideas in it. So bringing it back to my original question, what root sources were you looking at? What that were older than paganism? Do you reference like the Sumerians inside of the book? Do you talk about older civilizations at all?
I do talk about older civilizations, although not specifically the Sumerians. What I'm focusing mainly on is the philosophies themselves. So I'm speaking less about the peoples and less about the cultures and more so about the religious modalities and ideologies and the terms used in discussing them and the similarities between them, kind of. So it's almost like a guide, and I think that it's a good guide for somebody who's either a layman or an adept and who's interested in correlating and tying knots, kind of like tying loose strings, because it's all just connecting these things. So.
Well, yeah, these are constantly reborn ideas.
Right.
That's what I was talking to you a little bit about. We were talking about language and symbolism offline, and that's the craziest thing is these things are reinterpreted over and over and over again. And I think the core of what they meant originally has pretty much done a whole 180 from like what they originally were. I think we gave an example of like the swastika. How you can find this way, 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 way older, and at the same time, it's already been taken over by a war, like with one warring fracture.
Just one little historical blip. It's suddenly evil when it's actually supposed to represent like eternity and eternal life. But I mean, that's spirituality in general. So what we have oftentimes with religion is we're taking a spiritual divine experience and then taking that experience, and instead of understanding the experience fundamentally, we are worshiping the experience itself. So then we just have this kind of like echo chamber of religious worship around a story, as opposed to understanding what the story is about. And that's the whole thing, is like understanding a living God, not just a God in a Bible that was written by a bunch of monks and scribes, but instead understanding a living God that that Jesus talks about, that Jesus is saying that we're all connected to. He says that how many times does he say child of God, children of God, as well as child of man? Mm-hmm. And it just, to me, the more and more I read the New Testament, it comes to me in leaps and bounds off the page that he's talking about all of us being connected to God. He tells us over and over again that he teaches in parable. He's consistently teaching in parables. So I don't know how people can be out there trying to take the things he says literally when he's teaching you in parables. That.
Like you have to know to look at a Christian Bible as parables at the best. At the best, right. If it's just a great moral story, like I don't judge all Christians by the Christian Crusades. I judge them. I judge it by the people that actually follow the way of Christ,
which sadly doesn't really correlate. Usually,
it doesn't at all. It's the same way. It's like, okay, if somebody tells me, "Hey, this is the word of God," I go, no, kinda, and then they go, why is it kind of the word of God. It's kind of the word of God because it was written 100 years after his death by males who considered, women to be, lesser than men.
Another thing is this guy once asked me, and I would consider him like a friend, and we were sitting at a coffee at a cafe, a coffee shop, and just talking about the Bible and God. We specifically met up just to talk about the Bible. And I couldn't get past, I suppose, his literal interpretations. And I guess I was just accused of this, but he was kind of saying that my open-mindedness towards things like the Tao Te Ching was basically like devilry, right? And like being like lured in by the devil. And to me, that is not the devil. That's not what Jesus would have said. When Jesus is talking to the devil in the desert, he was alone. The devil was there tempting him. And, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And he says, no, for it is written, thou shalt not survive on bread alone, but on every word that's written by or every word that is coming from the mouth of God. Right. So, no, I think that to say that the knowledge that's from other cultures is the devil is to say that you're the only one that's right, and then to not listen to the other people's message. Like if you like look into the message of like Hinduism, how could a Christian like hate on a Hindu? You know what I'm saying? Like
I mean, you get that in Christianity just on the surface level. How can you, as a Christian that goes to church and lives a regular life, compare yourself to somebody that's Amish, that's practicing the religion way better than you are?
Absolutely.
Way better than you are.
They live it.
They live it, exactly.
It.
And then there's Mennonites, and then there's so many different levels to this. And we're not all Ken Hams. We don't all believe the earth is 3,000 years old and God placed all these trees that are older than the Bible here for us to observe. Like some of that shit's hard to do. Like I don't understand where they come up with some of that stuff.
What about dinosaurs? They're here to trick us.
Right.
Stop.
These fossils were placed here to trick us. Yeah, there was no dinosaurs ever on this planet.
Right? Occam's razor, the answer with the least number of assumptions is probably right. God's not trying to like trick us or like the devil's
Bossman, we were actually just talking about this. Bossman says Jesus is the only way to gain eternal life in heaven. Bossman says Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life.
Yes.
No one comes to the Father except through me, which is what we're talking about.
I am. What does Jesus say? I am. So no one comes to the Father except through me. Except through who? Except through Christ. Who is Christ? What is Christ? Jesus Christ is God incarnate. He has the God within him, right?
He's the Trinity.
Right. He is the living Trinity. We all have that God spark within us. And he was telling us this. He's trying to liberate people. He's not trying to make you get on your knees and worship him, although he is acknowledging the woman who oils his feet before even the owner of the house does. He will point that out, but he's not demanding that of us. What he's trying to point out is that we're all children of God. We're all created in God's image. And he's trying to wake us up as we're falling asleep. And Jesus is about to be taken away, and Jesus is waiting for visions from God, and God comes, and the disciples don't see because they're sleeping. And he says, you can't even stay awake. He's trying to wake all of us up. That's the thing. And he's consistently pointing out to the disciples that he's teaching us in parables. And he's not trying to trick us into worshiping him, although he was a wonderful man. And he was, yeah, we can say
he was so vocal about not being deceived by these false idols.
Right.
He goes, if anything, find the true source. He wanted you to question things. He wanted you to actually look into it and make sure you were following the right path.
As Alan Watts
not blindly
says, don't look at the finger pointing at the moon, but look at the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a few more questions coming in comments. Let's get right to the fact. Did he even exist at all? Only Only one of the world's known historians at the time even mentioned his name. The same Son of God story has been told long before White Jesus.
Well, I mean, that's assuming that we're talking about white Jesus now. I mean, yeah.
I don't think
we
there's
might
any
be
such
both
thing as
white.
White Jesus.
Well, we're both white guys, you know, but no, I mean, first of all, I don't think Jesus was white. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
But no, I mean, the thing is that I do historically believe that Jesus did exist. I think that there's evidence for that. And the more that you dig, you know, that's the thing is if you are doubting, I invite you to go and do the research, honestly, because if you look up things like, if you want to find a good book to dig into, check out The Case for Christ. Go purchase The Case for Christ, give it a read, come back to us next time. I really think it could actually change your mind, because I really do. I have bounced back and forth between so many different spiritual modalities in my life. I can't even tell you. I mean, it's been a wild ride. But I mean, I've experienced a lot of it. And like I've gone from being hardcore skeptic, wanting to be a physicist, to total shaman, DMT guide. You know, like it's a crazy 180 throughout my life. And like, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think you could probably attest to this. No matter what topic it is, when I have my mind made up that I have it all figured out, that's when I'm more wrong than I ever was.
Yeah, you have to be open-minded totally, or else you'll be like, oh, I'm a fool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to
Hey, Canadian, thank you for stopping in. And then Bossman has a question for the co-host. He goes, how does the co-host interpret the parable of the bird's rest in the mustard bush that grew extremely large, tree-like?
Oh, gosh. The parable of the mustard bush growing tree-like. I'm trying to remember this parable.
I don't know if I remember this parable either.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Mustard bush. And the last time I read through my New Testament was only about a month and a half ago. So, interesting. Yeah, I've read entirely through the New Testament about 6 times. But I'm trying to remember the exact parable. So, I mean, if you want to come back at us and throw us some text.
I was going to say, give us some context on what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a couple comments down, they're talking about so was Jesus or the disciples on hallucinogenic drugs. When the what is it, the acacia bush starts on fire and somebody gets a vision, I think it's the acacia bush that's actually
the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's a very DMT rich plant.
It's
It was kind of interesting that he got a vision when it was on fire in front of him. I mean,
yeah, and that they would historically notate that can happen.
Yeah,
like it's almost like they're saying, "Hey, if this happens, like, you know, that's the good stuff over there." But that's not to say that Jesus. I mean, okay, but also let's clarify something. Jesus turned water to wine.
Bossman says the Bible mentions dinosaurs in Job.
In Job.
Job, sorry.
No, got you. Dude, so that's interesting. Interesting. So I mostly read the New Testament, and I know that the Old Testament verifies the New Testament because it foretells the coming of Jesus. But as somebody who is not Jewish, as somebody who's a Christian, I don't study the Old Testament. What I follow are the words in red. I follow the words of Christ. So even like, gonna be honest, like, yes, I do think that like Corinthians has some beautiful passages that, you know, it should be read at weddings and stuff like that, you know. But I gotta say that like the letters, those weren't written by Jesus, those were written by the disciples, you know, like Jesus didn't have anything to do with writing the Bible. So, and you can say that they were filled with the Holy Spirit, but I don't buy it, because can you be filled with the Holy Spirit? Do you believe that you can? Can all of us? Then what makes that different than Jesus being filled with the Holy Spirit? So you see my argument, you know?
I feel like it's a never ending battle, because in the eyes of Christians, you will never be as good as Jesus. So it's an endless battle to try to be the best version you can.
I mean, pretty big shoes. Big shoes to fill.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, is that there's actually, and the name evades me, I have to look it up, but there is a Buddhist version of redemption through faith there is a Buddhist monk who basically kind of suffered enough through asceticism, and they meditated and became like a holy monk, a bodhisattva, and essentially you can pray to this monk, this divine being, and you can attain karmic redemption through that prayer. So that does actually exist in Buddhism, which is just interesting to note. So I think that Christianity has its place, and I think Jesus was teaching people. I would describe
that sounds like the modern idea of a Hail Mary getting said on you for confessing your sins and trying to get right with God. I mean, that's a Catholic idea of, I'm gonna confess my sins in order to get into a better place.
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of it is based on, as far as like opening up, like, I have sinned, like asking for forgiveness for your sins and stuff like that. Like, I mean, it's at the heart of the very faith itself, is redemption through faith. That's kind of like what it is built upon as a spiritual. That's like the spiritual modality and main philosophy behind it is redemption through faith. That's what we have at the root of it. What I was going to mention earlier, though, was with the friend I had met at a coffee shop, and I totally digressed, was that he asked me what the gospel was, if I knew what the gospel was. And I said, well, yeah, the gospel is about love. The gospel is talking about love and loving, loving your enemy even, which is radical, right? And he's like, no, that's not the gospel. He's like, that's in the Bible, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is that Jesus was God living, incarnate, was born on earth, died for your sins, and was resurrected, and like just told the story as if that's the gospel. It's like, that's not the gospel. That's what happens in the Bible. That's the plot. You're talking about
the story
of the Bible. Yeah. That's the story. That's not the gospel. The gospel is love. Like, come on.
Yeah. The gospel is the message the underlining message in the story.
Yeah.
If anything, that's what you should draw from it. First off, thanks Brooklyn Jake for stopping in. I appreciate it. And Indiana Jake brings up Mary Magdalene.
Yep.
And the interpretation of, the lost interpretation of what she was to Jesus is, I'm assuming, what he's talking about. Was she her friend? He kissed her on her blank. These texts have been brought up before. And then I always try to bring this up to other people when they're talking about Christianity and what kind of Christians they are. I go, okay, well, do you think of Mary Magdalene as a whore, or do you think of her as somebody who followed Christ and bettered themselves? Because religions split pretty evenly on that too.
And can I tell you another thing here is that Jesus was a rabbi, and it's not absolutely bound. However, like, as far as like community is concerned, rabbis are married. You're marrying people, you should be married in Jewish culture. Culturally speaking, rabbis are typically married. It's just a thing. So Jesus was a rabbi. He might have been married. He very well could have been married. If he was married, he could have been married to Mary Magdalene. If you read the Nag Hammadi library, which is a series of texts that were dug up out of the desert when somebody was looking for fresh dirt for farming, they found this clay pot, broke it open after a while because they thought there might have been genies inside of it. There weren't genies. Instead, they found these texts that were lost texts that had basically been taken out of the Bible after the Council of Nicaea, because rather than a monk destroying these texts from the Bible, he wanted to preserve them and not destroy the Word of God. So he put them in this jar and buried them. Later on, they were discovered, and it's the Nag Hammadi library. You can download free PDFs online, and I think everybody should read this. And in it is the Gospel according to Mary Magdalene, and she's like schooling all these other disciples, and I think that it's such a valuable read.
There's so many lost books. Well, I don't know if they're lost books or removed books.
They're removed, I believe.
Because people don't want to acknowledge the first woman. They don't want to. I mean, I do believe that there was a first woman before Eve. And most people don't want to address who she is. Her name's Lilith.
Yeah,
She
we're talking
is a
about
real
Lilith
person.
here.
Yeah, she is a real person.
Okay.
And they just tried to demonize her. And that's why I've always said the people that wrote these Christian books were trying to put women in a certain spot.
Yeah, and that's where I think Gnostic Christianity does kind of get it right. So if you research that a little bit, I think it's cool, but also beware perhaps of modern Gnosticism. You know, I just think that it's cool to have the access to the old texts, to the Nag Hammadi library.
Right. Well, if I ever ran into a woman who was a diehard Christian and it was the only way she could ever be, convinced of, any kind of, I don't know, afterlife, like I don't have a problem with people using anything in their life as long as it doesn't turn into a crutch, where if it was taken away, you wouldn't be able to function anymore.
True.
Like if I walked up to some person that was a Bible thumper and I said, well, but you wouldn't be here without my rib. Congratulations. Like that would be a hard thing for anybody to take, especially with modern society. I think women are just as equal to men. I think women are way more intuitive than men, and they have all kinds of abilities that men don't have. But the way the Bible depicts them is just, it was clearly written by guys.
Yeah. No, and let's be real though. Again, I made this point earlier, but I describe myself as a Christian. I don't describe myself as being Jewish. So I don't adhere to the Old Testament. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament no one should adhere to. Things like cutting off people's hands and taking people's eyes out.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
Yeah, slavery. I mean, we could point to quite a few things in the Old Testament that probably don't live by.
Yeah.
Brett had a question for you. He said, what's your favorite Bible verse?
I think maybe we should get into my book.
All right.
Yeah.
Good to deal with. All right.
Let's
Let me
get to the book.
I'm gonna jump through the rest of these. We have like five or six comments from each person to catch up to.
Okay.
Boss Man finally answered the mustard one. He said it was a test. He said Boss Man says
I figured.
He talks about himself in third person, so that's why I read Boss Man says every time. Boss Man says the overgrown mustard seed bush represents the Christian church, and the parable bird represents evil. Jesus is just telling us that there will be evil within his church, unfortunately.
Well, and there absolutely is, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. And that's why he tells you not to worship false idols.
And that there will be plenty of people who come in his name.
Yeah.
Look at a lot of the people who gravitate around the church. There's a lot of ugliness,
It says a slippery slope.
Revelation was inspired by psychedelics. That Revelation was actually inspired by psychedelics. I'm sorry.
Oh, I've heard these awesome texts that I've looked back at, and it's from like the 1930s and the 1940s, and they speak of Revelations like it's already happened.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and the idea that Revelations is coming is a new idea. Like they actually spoke about the four horsemen as being conquerors from the Middle East, and they rode in on horseback. And like I've heard some really interesting ideas about Revelations recently.
That's crazy. I mean, I do think that our timeline is skewed, and we were talking about this before we actually jumped on. I do think our timeline is skewed with like the pyramids being built, the Sphinx, the Giza Plateau, all that kind of stuff. I think it goes so much further back than we actually know.
Yeah, you just named everything that was older than the Bible. I mean, there's probably more things that are old. I mean, there's redwoods in California that are older than the Bible.
Maybe Buddhism, Hinduism, paganism, shamanism. We were talking about this earlier. Not to discredit Christianity, it's just that we have to acknowledge the things that came before, and to not do so would be stupid.
And that's what this whole book's about. That's what we've been talking about, is this source information that helped us get to where we are today. We're not saying Christianity's bad. Christianity's a great thing. And Joey's even saying he recognizes himself as a Christian.
I have a crucifix tattooed behind my ear.
A crucifix?
Yes, I'll show you. It's specifically so it can never be inverted.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that because I can't see you.
Your hair got in the way towards the end, but I saw it when you first showed it. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and I got it somewhere where it could never be put upside down because that bothers me. I do also have an Ankh tattoo, but the I think that all these modalities can coexist, and I think that that's the point. And if you don't look at all of these different philosophies and religions, you're not living an examined life. And I believe, was it Descartes who said an unexamined life is not worth living?
Mm-hmm.
So there we go.
That is Descartes. I
really quickly need to let my doggy outside.
Oh, you're good.
Thankfully,
you're
I'm
good.
right on my porch, so it's going to be like lickety split. But
all right.
she's a good girl. I don't want to make her wait too long. Everybody.
Bossman says Jesus was upset at the whole solid animal and bird for exorbitant prices, just like any other guy. Hello, Emily. Welcome back.
Yo. I'll be right back. I'm letting my doggy out.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Right
on. The Sumerian, the Mayans, etc. Yeah, those were all older civilizations. Yeah, but we were talking about that earlier. I mean, so many of these things are roots. I mean, and that was like one of the first things we talked about was paganism, the solstices and stuff like that. That's what all of our Christian holidays are based on. Does anybody really think Jesus' birth correlates with December? I mean, really? Like just knowing your own history, and if you're going to account that these people are real people, then it's like saying that Jesus was white. I think there's a balance to these things where you can acknowledge history and then also acknowledge where we might have adapted. And I think what we were talking about with pagan solstices and stuff like that it correlates perfectly. We know Jesus wasn't born in December. Like, we know he probably wasn't white, but if you want to believe, that that's totally fine, I guess. But it's kind of hard to say that everybody else is wrong. But maybe Bossman, maybe he'll get into. He said the guest is on the verge of blasphemy in regards to saying Revelations was inspired by hallucinogenic drugs. So hopefully we can get into that and get into it a little bit deeper.
We can talk more about that. Let me get some more water real quick.
Oh, you're good, man. No hurry.
So, no, that's interesting. I mean, the thing is that there's talk. They specifically talk about. They talk about substances in the Bible. So to say,
oh yeah,
interesting.
They talked about THC oil. I actually did a school report on that. And they talked about THC oil and that they used to rub it on their bodies in order to soothe pain and stuff like that. So like even cannabis was that was the purpose of my report, was to point out there was actually cannabis in the Bible. And people were like, no, it wasn't in there. I was like, yeah. I was like, they weren't smoking it. I was like, the same way that they talk about it now. I was like, but they were talking about these oils that they would put together and they'd rub on people's bodies and it would soothe pain. They'd also help with pregnancy and pregnancy pains and other stuff like that, nausea.
Interesting. I mean, I had heard that some of the original hash was created by the people growing it, running through the fields and getting clumps of trichome stuck to their body. So it would have essentially been like a bubble hash kind of thing. And then they just peel that off and that's the hash.
Yeah, that would make sense. Gosh. Yeah, that'd be a weird way to figure it out.
Imagine you're just peeling hash off your body.
You're like, I should probably try to light this on fire and smoke it. What led you to that?
I guess you got
like. Well, you'd assume it smelled like a skunk or something bad. Like most, like it's an acquired taste. I would assume with most marijuana.
Right. Yeah, I don't know for sure.
I mean, I don't like. I was actually having this discussion with somebody the other day. I think sativas smell pretty, and I think they smell nice. I think indicas are not meant to do that. They're not supposed to smell nice. Yeah. They're not supposed to smell pretty. That's your skunky, your different smells. Yeah,
it's letting you know this is medicine. Yeah.
Oh, that Brett, you came with the classic John 3:16. I like that. All right, and then also Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
I talked a little bit about Genesis in here. We could definitely get into that. I mean, there's definitely correlation between Genesis and other creation stories, which is a beautiful thing. I love to see it.
So what should we jump into first in the book? Do you want to jump into chapter 16? I don't want you to give away too much because I know we're covering a lot of topics where you're like, no, I want to show you. But I don't want you to give away too much.
I do have a few of my favorite Bible verses in here, which is kind of specifically why I wanted to dive in. Somebody asked to hear a Bible verse from me, one of my favorites, but it's just there's also so many. That's one of the problems. I mean, I had just had notebooks of Bible verses written down, like, "Ooh, that's a good one." Like, it's silly. It's kind of silly. It feels like I'm really diving. Like with my notebooks, like you'll see, it'll be like Bible scripture, and then like a bunch of arrows to the next page, and then it's like shit from the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching, and like correlating to like the Bible verses where it's the same thing. And that's how this kind of book is written, honestly. So I don't know. I mean, I had mentioned DMT earlier in passing, just being a DMT guide for people.
I think this last comment, I'm going to throw it up because I think it'll go into what we're about to talk about. Bossman says the word sorcery in the New Testament is a Greek word, pharmakia, SP. Our word for drugs. By the way, Bossman says Bossman has no issue with weed. Okay. But I wanted to touch on like magic, pharmacy, sorcery. All of these things, all of these things are interchangeable when you're talking about older ideas.
Yeah, and honestly, immediately mushrooms come to mind, and mushrooms preserved in things like honey, the way that the Greeks were doing. So I don't believe that necessarily those things are sorcery or evil, because you're talking about things that God created, right? I
mean, even religion was described as sorcery at that time, though. Like all of these things were actually interchangeable. It was the same with science and alchemy, and like alchemy and science were considered blasphemy to the church. Like all of these things were, but science is accepted now. Like we don't think of it as a bad thing now. Like, and magic was also thrown into there because I think there's a level of alchemy that could be considered magic.
Okay, let's talk about this. Hold on. Where do we think the Christians, the fundamentalist Christians, get their fear and their aversion to the horrible number 666 from? Where does numerology come from?
It's not listed in the Bible.
It's not in the Bible.
It says because we made the jump for 666. All they said was the mark of the beast in the Bible.
I think that it might be mentioned somewhere by King Solomon, possibly. But King Solomon also practiced a lot of demonology and a lot of rituals that modern Christians would consider demon worship, despite the fact that King Solomon apparently summoned demons in order to build Solomon's temple. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and he's like controlling them or something somehow.
Well, he had a list of the hierarchy of demons.
See, and I don't even, honestly, that's something I don't even like to get into too much, because like I am a light worker, right? I work with all this positive energy to try to bring people to the light. I know all about that kind of shadowy, dark stuff. I know about angelology and demonology with the hierarchies, right? But I don't like to really get too much into that. First of all, I don't like to put power into thought forms. And second of all, I want to steer people towards a healthy direction to get them started. I always hesitate to point people in the direction of learning about hierarchies and this and that, because I think that's a slippery slope. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a balance to it. I like my Led Zeppelin and I like my Aleister Crowley's as well. But I do think names are power. And I do think manifesting these things and talking about them a lot does bring them around you. I think manifestation is a real thing, and I do think names are powerful. That's why I'm not here listing popular demons or something like that.
Right. No. What I think is funny, and I mentioned this on Facebook to my family, and I think I might have hurt some people. But I keep in mind, I am not partisan by any way when we talk about politics. But I think it is funny that the far left liberals have elevated Trump's name to the point of almost having like power as a thought form. Like the name Trump like brings just so much heavy connotation to mind. There's so much affiliated with the name, and it's just interesting to me that like, yes, like they convicted him and stuff. You know, I think that all these people are happy with what they've done, but at the same time, they've kind of immortalized the man. You know,
I mean, he was coming in with a name that what's the term when you outsmart somebody with an idea? You can trump them with your idea, right? And that was a term prior to him running. No, I think there's some significance in that, like to the fact that like now they can actually use the word when they're talking about the individual as well as the actual situation. I don't. I think that it's a weird thing that we do with language. I think there could be some subtle text in there.
Yeah, I mean, and who knows? It might be intentionally designed a little bit.
And Brett, we'll get into that. The book is for sale. Is it listed on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. The Arrow's Path. The apostrophe is in a weird place. Some would argue. Oh, other way. Some would argue that this apostrophe should be over here. I would argue the other way around, but that's okay.
But all right, let's get into the hallucinogenic properties of your book.
Absolutely. So I talk about all sorts of stuff in here, but yeah, I do definitely mention my experiences with psychedelics. So chapter 11, I'm just going to read you. I mean, we'll just read the whole chapter. You know, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
So it's titled DMT, the Life Changer. I made a pilgrimage for my first experience with DMT. I had practiced shamanism and spirit journeying for nearly a decade at that point, and I felt I was appropriately prepared for this experience. To begin the DMT ceremony, my guide filled a container with water in the other room while I internally recited a shamanic prayer I had received on a spirit journey. Thank you, Spirit, for this fiery, watery, earthy, airy planet. It is so perfect. My guide brought the water into the room and placed the container on the bed. We were in a hotel room, non-smoking, so we skipped the smudging we would have typically done to cleanse the space. Ah, my water is down here. We both offered 2 rose petals, one red and one white, and set an intention with each petal. She then gave me a protective sachet in a small glass bottle, which sat in my lap, and a slice of rose quartz, which I initially thought was carved with the number 15, but then realized was the Omega symbol. And we come back to that later. The stone sat on my left side, and a chunk of fluorite sat on my right. My guide made an offering of a few drops of CBD oil in the water, and then placed a few drops under my tongue. She then handed me a glass vial containing frankincense and myrrh. I enjoyed the luxurious dark perfume as she prepared the pipe. When you smoke DMT, it's a shorter trip, although it is often a very powerful experience. Drinking ayahuasca, in contrast, is described as this sort of magic carpet ride through the rainforest of Pachamama. The ayahuasca experience lasts upwards of 6 to 12 hours. I would be smoking a changa base with DMT crystals sprinkled on top. My guide sat next to me on the bed and handed me the pipe, explaining I was to take a big hit and hold it for 15 seconds before exhaling. I chuckled and mentioned my misinterpretation of the Omega symbol. She handed me a lit wick, and I took a big hit and held it, counting to 15 with my eyes closed. I began to see a swirling pattern, almost like thin ribbons waving in the air. When I opened my eyes, I was a bit startled to see the same swirling patterns in the air and on everything in the room. I took another hit, and then another, seeing more and more of this beautiful underlying sort of fabric. Next thing I remember, I opened my eyes and my guide asked, "Do you want to go back?" Yes. She said she was going to sprinkle some more DMT on the changa, and as she did, my vision of the room was beautiful and saturated in divine energy. She came back and I took 4 big hits. The last thing I remember seeing as my eyes shut was her left eye, outlined in an oriental version of the Eye of Horus, related to the moon and deflection of malevolent forces. I remember hearing her say, "Remember to try to hold it for and I was out. Around me, in front of me, and encompassing my entire field of vision, everywhere I turned, was a giant palace or temple of beautiful columns and arches which began to expand and shift in front of me. My field of view only really moved as I physically moved my head, and I was still aware of my breath in my body. As the structure shifted into a beautiful twisting mandala in front of me, I became aware of a god, prince, deity, a male energy behind the vision, and dark black, abruptly pierced and shattered by magic white light. I saw contrasting images and patterns, divine truths being projected upon me like brilliant beams of holy light from some sepulchre of source energy. This deep knowledge was revealed to me through these stained glass windows of cosmic mandalas. I realized that this was the time to ask a question, so queried, what is the nature of suffering? I then received this Buddha Dharma message of suffering resulting from attachment and achieving cessation of suffering through non-attachment, through separating oneself from the physical body and the ego. Already feeling quite separate from my body, I released, sort of unpacked my ego bit by bit, and I realized the big part of myself to release was my chosen name, Amun Raja. I felt that I was prepared to release this too, my egoic attachment, and hold to this name and what it had meant to me. As I let go of this final attachment, I was immediately enveloped in this beautiful bliss and happiness, basking in absolute contentedness. The infinitely unfolding mandala was still there, still beautiful, serene, but I felt I had received my message and it was time to go back. I slowly opened my eyes, closed my hands over my heart, feeling my entire experience beaming from my heart cave, glowing emerald green. I looked out the window and exclaimed, wow. I integrated this experience deeply into my being, and I do feel that it changed me for the better. Afterwards, I began guiding others through DMT experiences, and my further explorations led to some very curious visions and insights. I once saw a purple man and an orange woman dancing, but could also see they were made from the same stuff. On the darker and grittier side of the spectrum, I saw an apple, which turned into a skull, forming a skeleton figure. He pulled back the lid of a container and outpoured all of this consumerism, plastic, bombs, chemicals, waste and refuse, starvation, homelessness. It was the dark side of humanity and society that I didn't want to look at, but it was being displayed right in front of my eyes. At one point, I smoked DMT in my bed and was looking around my room and saw all of these fibers making up everything around me. And when I looked at my hand, I could see spiraling red and blue waves that oscillated together in sympathetic resonance, making up my hand and arm and body. I could see how I was irrefutably connected to everything through the beautiful structure and vibration of the universe. It's chapter 11.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Since I didn't say this already, I like that you actually did it with your storytelling. Is we're not actually we're not glorifying the use of these substances by any means. That's why he told you the dark and the light of his experience. There was things that would throw you off, and that would be a little on the darker side.
Yeah, I've heard it told that smoking weed is like getting your driver's license, and then tripping on psychedelics is like having your pilot's license. So you need to be ready to fly. It's not something to jump into. DMT is the most powerful psychedelic on the face of the planet. Don't mess with it if you're not prepared to. And I'm not saying that anybody necessarily should. This is me simply sharing my experiences and how those experiences kind of tie into my spiritual overview, honestly.
Yeah. And another thing I would say is, just like we were talking about earlier with other topics, when you think you're ready, you're probably not. When you have your mind made up about what's going to happen, you are going to be blown away by how wrong you are.
Absolutely, man. I mean,
there is no right answer to what you're going to find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're still going to be left with questions.
Oh, more.
Yeah, there will be more questions, but you'll just maybe feel a little bit more confident, in who you are. But I think that,
but then don't be surprised if the next trip you take is different than the prior one.
my last
Or
trip,
one
my
day you
last
could wake
trip
up and
was
nothing happens.
no, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always going to be different, or you just never know. But yeah, my last trip was the one where on DMT, shall I say, was the one where the apple turned into the skull, and I saw all the consumerism, and it was a necessary thing, I think, to see, but it was also very ugly. And I had more DMT that I could have kept experimenting with and using. I let the rain take it. I was baptized in a heavy rain over the summer.
Yeah.
And I let the
I
rain.
mean, I think that's a good way. It's a good way to part because some people think because that actually points to exactly what we're talking about. There's no set amount that you need.
No,
That's
I had
why,
I had
like, if you
plenty.
buy, you probably buy a certain amount because that's what they're selling is a certain amount, or that's what you're able to
Right.
obtain is a certain amount. But odds are, there is no set amount on what you need. It's an interesting thing when it comes to these, and it's almost actually any psychedelic, to be honest. Um,
It's all
you,
the
you
personal
never
body
know.
chemistry as well.
Say that again.
Oh, it's all down to personal body chemistry as well.
Oh, exactly. I mean, some people will have no effects. Some people will have extreme effects. Um, Let me give a great example of. I do this just to kind of balance it out. It's not all love and light if you don't treat it like that, because you get what you put into these things,
Yes.
and you get answers sometimes if you're seeking answers, and sometimes if you need to be told something, you'll be told something. Um, and you don't always have a choice in it. So I would just say before you experiment with anything like this ever in the future, make sure you know yourself, um, know what makes you feel like you are who you are. Like I always say, breathing exercises
Breathing.
are,
Learning box breathing can help if you're having like kind of panic attack type stuff.
yeah,
Longer exhales as opposed to inhales, because what causes more anxiety with breathing is when you don't breathe all that air out. So you want to breathe
yeah.
all of it out before you take it
Well,
in.
that's actually exactly what I was going to reference. You called it box breathing. A
Yeah.
gentleman in our chat calls it Wim Hof. He uses the Wim Hof method, which is it helps you store more oxygen because it's a slow release afterwards. You can also hold your breath for longer periods of time. It's the same reason swimmers are able to stay under for longer. Is that it's the idea of the slow release and making sure you get everything out, and then also when you're drawing in, you draw in everything and you retain it. But yeah, the majority of the stuff that we exhale, we don't probably take it all in unless
Right.
you're breathing properly.
It's true. No, and I mean, you got to be using your abdomen too. Most people aren't even exercising.
Oh yeah.
And most people are only breathing with the top half of their lungs, as a matter of fact, and they're slowly suffocating themselves. We should be sure that we're properly oxygenating our blood, and that our brain can breathe.
So I recommend everybody get one of these. It's for people to strengthen their breathing when you have some kind of respiratory issue. And what it does is when you're drawing in, you have to keep the level at a certain level the whole time and maintain it as long as you can. It slowly strengthens your breathing ability over time. And there's all kinds of different things that you can do. I know people do different altitude training to do it. Um, they use like breathing apparatuses to do it. There's all kinds of different stuff that you can do, but just being able to learn how to do it, just sitting in your own living room, just being in your own thoughts and just breathing in and breathing out. Like I always got the first time I learned, because I'm highly ADHD. It took me so long to be able to sit still and just like try to meditate. So what actually worked for me was I was in a drug. I was in some kind of drug rehab class, and I was there. I was so mad. I was there for marijuana 2 years before marijuana got legalized. There's people in there on heroin and all these like serious drugs, and I'm there for marijuana, and I felt really dumb. I felt like I was blowing it for all of the marijuana users. Like, oh, this kid got in trouble. He's making us all look bad. Like, but they did a guided meditation, and it was like was like a journey. It was like storytelling. Like you were imagining you were walking through the woods and you were focusing on like the sounds that you heard. And it eventually got me to a point where I could just look at a flame and meditate. And I was never able to sit still like that before, but I slowly got better at it. And I think it was all based on breathing. Like
Yeah.
the breathing is what really grounded me. And when I feel out of my element, no matter how I got there, whether we're talking about some of the substances or whether we're talking about just anxiety, anything, that breathing brings you back and just lets you know, like, you're a human. These are the abilities you have.
It's all in the breath. It's all in the breath. The life is in the breath. Amen. Amun. Amun Raja. Amun is the Egyptian god of air, of the breath. So, and I mean, in the beginning, what was the word, right? So, I mean, you were talking about breath.
Yeah.
Life comes from the breath. When in many cultures, when man was like created, God breathed life into man. So, I'm looking for this one chapter on meditation because
What were you saying about 16? What's 16 cover? Chapter 16.
Oh, you know what? We can get back to chapter 16.
Okay.
Chapter 16 is all about.
You're gonna end up reading this whole book to me. I know what's gonna happen.
Well, we won't read all of it, but I'll read you just a little bit. You know, I want to get you guys interested.
But yeah, before we get off today, or after we get off, share me the link to the Amazon page. I got a few people that have already asked about where they can find the book. So
absolutely, and I want to let you guys know I am already finding some typos. There will be definitely another revision that comes out eventually, but you know, it is what it is. I guess when you convert stuff into PDFs, it's going to happen. So
yeah,
but yeah. I'm, you know, like I said, I want to read to you this chapter just about meditation because you're talking about like different types of meditation. I would love to share a little bit about like Vipassana meditation and stuff like that.
Because I was never able to understand like the Om meditation, like the humming, the repetitive.
Mantric meditation.
Okay, yeah, I was never able to figure out mantric or what's would tantric be sexual then? Tantric,
well, I don't know if there's necessarily a tantric meditation. I haven't studied tantric yoga per se. It's not something I super practice, but I mean, to me, tantrism is like the union between like a divine feminine and divine masculine energy. I don't know about like a tantric meditation. I'm sure that they're out there, but I can't say that I'm a super specialist on that. I suppose I'm more so focused on the journey.
Because I think that could be very spiritual on like a Mother Earth level.
It is.
And like it could be an individual thinking about like Mother Earth, right?
Absolutely. And I think that it's a beautiful union. And I think that when two spiritually enlightened people come together with intention, it is a beautiful thing. But I'm just not an expert on it.
But I don't know. I'm just speculating on it. I was just thinking of like, because there's the internal where what would be with somebody else, and then the external of there's something greater than me that I consider feminine. And shout out to Brett. He pulled up your link and found it for everybody. He's got it on the bottom of the screen. Nice job, man.
Right on. Thank you.
Found the actual book and the link over on Amazon.
Yeah, so there's also a PDF version, so, like on Kindle or whatever. So it is on Kindle. There's a soft cover and the hardcover version. But yeah, no, I definitely invite you to check it out. Like I said, though, I do warn you that I already saw a typo in the chapter about DMT where it says like in my field of vision, it says in my field division. But I think that you guys can figure it out. I think anybody reading this book has got to be at least kind of smart. Maybe I'm giving everybody too much credit.
I haven't decided yet. Everybody is a general term.
Right.
Kind of broad.
Very broad term. Talking about a lot of people with everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, let me see, chapter 3 is when I get into that really
meditation.
Yeah, talking about insight and compassion meditation. And we do talk about mantric meditation here a little bit. So, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and hit this cup of water here.
Oh, yeah. I could use some hydration myself.
Oh yeah, you got to stay hydrated, man. Water is the juice of life.
Boy,
I-
I wish I drank more of it. It's my
Water
biggest thing.
always finds the lowest ground. Basically, the place nothing else wants to be. Right? That's from the Tao Te Ching, and Jesus does that. I talk about that in the book too. So
Joey,
get back to that.
the Kishwaukee River would fuck up the Tao Te Ching.
It would, and the thing is that I've touched it, man. So I'm screwed. I don't know if you guys know there is
No.
Curse.
What's the significance of the Kishwaukee River? Not the curse around it.
That's all I know.
It's one of the only rivers on this whole planet that runs north.
Oh well, yes.
You were just saying that water goes to the lowest point, and I said the Kish is one of those things that would blow the mind of the Tao Te Ching because it's the only one that doesn't follow science when it comes to that.
Well, it's got to be going down. Dang it!
It doesn't work like that. It runs through it falls into DeKalb, and then it would rise again, but it all comes from upsprings, and anything that comes from an upspring technically isn't falling. It's usually pressure moving and changing positions.
I was tracking the Kishwaukee River up into the Rock River and like all these estuaries and trying to figure out where it all comes from. And it's like it meets up with this lake, but the lake is like kind of also fed by the river, but the river also like ebbs and flows. And it's like it's all seasonal, dude. Who knows?
Joey, you want me to blow your mind?
Yeah.
So you know how I told you I went on a kayaking trip, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Kishwaukee River on the South Branch starts in Shabana. It starts at a bridge. You can take that all the way. So I took that from there all the way to Oregon. I took it all the way to Oregon.
Okay.
My parents have a campsite up there. That's 72 miles from basically our town all the way out to Oregon. Yeah, wow. It's a 2.5 day trip.
That's crazy.
On a kayak.
A kayaking trip, like.
Oh yeah, I mapped it all out because I sat there one day and I was like, I got to figure out where this water goes. And you were saying you mapped it out. And I'm like, no. Trust me, I've mapped it out. Like, I've actually traveled it. It was wild.
It.
Yeah, oh yeah. I've done it. So I've done it 4 times now, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, dude. So
I just took my first one.
Do you know about Black Hawk Springs?
Yep.
So cool.
Yeah. Dude, everything in the Byron, Oregon area, once you start getting into that like bedrock that the water's cutting into, like you're looking at like when you look at the Kish in our town, it's man-made why it's there. Yeah. It's not the way it used to run. But when you get to like Byron and Oregon, it's been running there for so long that like it's cutting holes in rocks. You got towers for the Native Americans above it. Like you could feel the history in that area. It's really weird. It means something. And then dumb kids come in. Then dumb kids come in and like tag the rocks with graffiti and make me feel like shit, just to keep me grounded and human.
Yeah, why you got to do that, man? You know, but kids, they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
I try to understand that, you know, that layer of stone is going to wash off, and you know I try to like come to it, like accept that.
Oh yeah but it's only going to be a small blip in that stone's existence, even exposed to us.
I saw this story that was a tearjerker that said something about like and it coincides with something Tesla said about how like a crystal has a life cycle and we don't really understand crystals, but they are alive, you know. And then I saw this little story, and it was just a little blip, and it said something about like a boy picked up a rock and showed it to a girl, and then the boy threw it into the water, and then the boy and the girl left, and still that was the rock's favorite day. Like, dang.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, personification.
Because it would change so much. That would have never happened without that kind of influence.
Talk about it. Yeah. Complete environment.
Yeah. And without some kind of change, it would have been stagnant.
Yeah, and it was for who knows how long.
Yeah. Oh man. Unless it, no, I would say it was shore related. Hopefully, if it was that close to the water, it was shore related.
Gotta be.
Man, no, because we've talked about so much tonight, especially when it comes to like continental drift and stuff like that. Just like how much history in general is just lost to us, and we just have no idea of. And I mean, I think we see it today when we're just discussing topics like this. Like just discussing topic like this, history is lost to the people that I think are set in their ways. Like,
Right.
and it's not presented to people though. Like that's why
Right.
your book is an interesting book, is because these ideas aren't really presented to people as a whole. Like you can dig for them and find pieces of it here and there.
Sure.
Like everything we've touched on was a piece of something.
Right.
Like
To have it all brought together.
yeah, that's where I think your book is so like actually influential, because you don't see a gathering of all of these things. Like maybe with just religion, but not with spirituality on top of it, or any of the other realms that tie into that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I did see that there was a little bit of a gap, and not very many people write about this kind of stuff or are very forthcoming about it. Or I think that the people that are, are not necessarily people that I would tune into. They're not from, there's not nobody that I vibe with. So I
Well,
just
and
want.
I also think there's depending on how many topics you're covering, just like some people think back in the time that religion and alchemy and all these things were like bad, they also want you to classify these things as science fiction, or like, and that's why I asked you about publishing and stuff like that, because I was really curious to how they would classify it and how accepting they were to talk about a topic like this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was as I'm trying to remember. I believe it's categorized under both philosophy and world religion. So, and that those are the majority of the topics really here. So, I mean, sure, we talk about a few other things, but of course, there's going to be some banter. Um, yeah, no, I think that's all. It's important to like carry forth into your life, like just this energy of um, constantly faceting, like the most to polish and facet the crystal that is your life. That's an
Yeah.
analogy that
Well, I
sometimes.
mean, and that's what you're pulling from all these texts, is that arcing truth of what are you supposed to take from these religions, these teachings, these everything, these experiences? What are you supposed to take from them that is, I don't know, encompassed in all of them? If you were going to pull out the best values of all of these things, what would you find? And that's where I think your book kind of points to it.
Yeah, no, I I thank you because
I
yeah,
mean, the little bit that you've told me about it and that we've talked, I know where I have a pretty good idea of where your book's going, but I'm definitely going to have to dig into it myself.
absolutely, man. No, I mean, I'm super stoked just for it to finally be out, and like I said, I definitely will be like putting out a revision here and updating this or that. But I mean, it's a wonderful, like you said, kind of like grouping of all this different experience that I've had, and I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep writing more books. I want to talk about a lot more topics that I didn't even get close to covering. Like, I have a lot to say about, like I said, this is all about philosophy and religion. I didn't talk about the cultures. I didn't talk about the pyramids. I didn't talk about all sorts of stuff that I want to talk about. So,
I
yeah, I
mean,
think there's a
just
lot more.
just knowing you and your openness, 10 years ago you wouldn't believe what's in the book right now, and 10 years ago, I mean 10 years after now, you're not going to believe the same things that are in the book.
You're right.
I know your mind's going to change about these things, but it's not in a it's not in a subgressive way. Like you're not what's the you're not recessing, I guess.
Right.
You're growing, and you're evolving your ideas to better suit your reality and your experiences.
Well, in the words of William Blake, nothing lasts, but nothing is lost, right?
Hmm.
So No, I think that's useful to carry forth into your life. Just remembering, like, we're living in this illusory temporal world of Maya, as the Buddhists call it, and we really need to see that all of these circumstances that we're living in are bound to change, and so we need to accept things. Like, we need to be okay with going with the flow. We need to follow the path of least resistance, which is what Taoism teaches us. And I mean, yeah, that was the best day of that rock's life.
That reminds me of what's it called? When people pull flowers or cut flowers and pull them out of the ground in order to give them to somebody because they're really pretty.
Right.
Like when the better thing to do would be to plant a seed or something like that and keep bringing that person to those flowers that are
Yeah.
living now. Like there's an idea of altering things to try to make it into a materialistic thing when it doesn't have to be. Like we can appreciate the beauty in things that are just there.
Well, and that's
And if you love something, let it be. That idea.
that's totally a mechanism of the ego to and I mean, Wayne Dyer talks about this, but the mechanism of the ego is to say more, more. That's the mantra of the ego, is to, once we have something, we want to attain more of it. Once we have something, we want something else, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that,
It's true.
yeah, we need to be accepting of where we are. And I mean, our path will always begin right where we're at, so I mean, and we're constantly, again, this is something I talk about in the book, but we have free will, and free will is like basically the curse with which we constantly are determining who we are, what our character is. So I mean, it's a beautiful thing, right? But you can look at it as we're constantly testing our own character in a way, always. Yeah, it's like I think it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, it definitely is something that drives you, or should drive you, to improve yourself. And I think that if you if you have improved yourself, then you want to better the world. That's the final outcome, is we're trying to better the world. We want to help, like, other people. And I think that is the bodhisattva's journey, somebody who has attained enlightenment, and rather than dropping out and leaving, they stay here and they teach others and they bring them to the light as well. And that's what Jesus was a bodhisattva.
What makes you think that? Because this is one of my favorite philosophical questions to get into. What makes you think that humans have free will? And I'll tell you just a little bit of backstory. The reason I don't think humans have free will is because of my belief in time travel and
Hmm.
the possibility of it.
Okay, see, that is interesting. I don't believe in determinism, because I mean, if you believe in time travel, then you have to believe somebody could time travel and change the future.
I think it's similar to how H.G. Wells actually interprets it. You could go back in time, but you couldn't change certain staples of events. Like if so, like he goes back and tries to save his girlfriend, and what happens is she keeps dying just in different scenarios. He just changes the scenario, but it's still the same outcome.
Hmm.
So I do think there's things that are set in stone. I do think it could be the illusion of free will, and yeah, I think you want to think that the decisions you're making are going to have a big impact, but I also think that's a human ego thing as well. To
Hmm.
think that you're making a big impact,
That,
like
that, that
it's a
makes
balance. It's a balance to me. I don't know.
No, absolutely. Everything in life is a balance. It's a yin yang. So it it's also, we live in a world where we make plans and God laughs. The universe just makes joke after joke after joke, and we do live in a yin yang where there's constant bifurcation. Right? Anytime we talk about something, it gets more and more semantically charged. So I think, oh gosh, I think that we have free will because the seat of the mind rests within us. Our I believe it's Jivatman, which is our personal soul. That's like our spiritual body, right? Then that's the next step up from that, according to the Hindus, is Atman, which is the higher soul. And then you're attached to Brahma and stuff from beyond that. But My point is that we are our own divine agents. So I've also heard that angels don't have free will, which is an interesting speculation, because then how did Lucifer fall?
I think it would depend on. I think it depend on the classification of angel. I'm really like, if I have to acknowledge demonology, I have to acknowledge the hierarchy of angels, and that there's multiple kinds of angels, and they're described in different ways, especially throughout Christianity, Catholicism, and Judaism.
Yeah. The
Like
description.
some of them are just wings, and like they're always covering their faces and their
Yep.
bodies, and they have like several sets of wings. There's
Yep.
cherubim or cherub,
The cherubim. Yeah.
cherubim. Okay.
Yeah. Or well, there's also seraphim.
Yeah, there's
That-
and then
That
some
may
of
be,
them just are the word of God, like they just speak on behalf of God.
yeah, they're constantly like singing praises of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's so many different levels of angels, and it's probably just like white Jesus. Like we just think of angels as a winged being that probably doesn't have any male or female appendages.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a completely different. I mean, there's plenty of memes nowadays about like biblically accurate angels, So yeah, they're supposed to have.
Oh yeah, they said they would be scared. Like
Yeah.
if you look into what an angel would be, the way they're described, it is not most of the time a like nice being.
We're talking about possibly an interdimensional being, because if
Well, and
God,
every time they present themselves, they say, "Don't fear me." Like they say, "Don't be scared," or they
Yeah.
say, like every time they introduce themselves to any human, they do the exact same thing. So
So-
they have to be scary.
No, well, exactly. And here's the thing, and Michio Kaku talks about this in, I think, his book Hyperspace,
Okay.
or it could be Parallel Worlds. I think it's Hyperspace. But so if you were to see like a if you were a second dimensional being, a two-dimensional being, experiencing a third dimensional being coming into your world, you would see this like just one line of a finger, a thumb, now an arm, now an elbow. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't know what the hell you were
Oh
seeing.
yeah, it'd be like being zoomed in. It'd be
Right,
a wild
exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. You could only see the little bit that you could possibly fathom. So
And we're trying to describe something that's fourth dimensional, looking into us on third dimensional, which we're only guessing and speculating what it might be, because
yeah.
I mean we can guess how many dimensions there are and what higher dimensions, but at the same time it's like what would it look like for us to reach down into the television set on a two-dimensional uh, display? It would be we can guess that it would be flat, but we don't know, because that's what we're assuming for the higher dimensions as well.
Right.
That's actually our guess, which odds are it's probably not that.
Right. It would look third dimensional, but be completely nonsensical.
Right. It's the idea that you could turn probably a piece of paper sideways and put it straight up on a camera, and you probably couldn't see it if this was thin enough, but at the same time, it would still be there if I turned it sideways.
Right.
And we're trying to place that on higher dimensions, and it's hard to do because we don't know what the vision would look like.
We don't know what the entities look like. We don't know exactly. We don't know how they would be distorted according to our perception of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's unfathomable. So it makes sense that they say, "Be not afraid."
Oh yeah, because I mean, I don't even know how they would represent it. Like people always give me shit for it. I think Dogma is actually a really good movie when it talks about the hierarchy of angels and actually explaining the history of Catholicism, Christianity decently. I mean, of course, there's jokes in it and everything else. It's a Jay and Silent Bob movie, but at the same time, and Ben Affleck's an angel, so it tells you enough. But there is the idea that they're like cutting off their wings, separating themselves from God, and like talking about key points that are depicted in the Bible. And that's, I mean, we didn't even get into this tonight, but I think our depictions of the Bible are very important. We talked about it a little bit, but not in the sense of like, oh, what if this was like when we saw chariots in the sky or something like that? What if we were actually depicting something else, even if we made it religious? Maybe we were actually depicting higher technology that we couldn't explain.
Right.
Like that's also very possible to me, especially when we're talking about old civilizations.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about Hindu texts having accounts of space battles. They're
Oh yeah.
talking these strange shapes blasting fiery missiles at each other in the sky. I mean,
What are the ships called? The God, the man, I can't even think of. They have actual names for ships. I can't remember it, but it's from the Mahabharata.
yeah,
Is the battle in the skies that they used to have between
yep, no,
two races of beings, like a blue race of beings, and it actually described the beings being different colors
yeah,
from
I,
each other.
it's it's pretty wild. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's all out there. You just have to go look for it.
What do you ever talk about in your book the idea of civilization going from multi gods to a singular god as a mass?
I don't I don't necessarily talk about the compartmentalization down to monotheism. Um, I because the thing is, when I'm talking about Hinduism, I'm mostly quoting the Bhagavad Gita, which is Krishna giving Arjuna kind of life advice on how to carry through on this battle. He's about to engage in a battle with
Mhm.
people that are like family members and friends, and
Yeah,
people.
that's the one thing that you see in all of that is they're always family members that are battling to the death, and
Yeah,
they have
king.
like small they're like small ties. I was gonna say, but yeah, they're always like brothers or cousins that are fighting each other for. I mean, it's how we explain our planets. It's how we explain basically everything around us, whether it's religion. But it's back when they had multiple gods. It was like these were all of our planets, and they were fighting, and that's the same things that we look back to in the Sumerian text now. Like that was the horrible interpretations of Zechariah Sitchin. I think it was Zechariah Sitchin. Yeah, he all of the planets represented actual people, and they can be correlated into a lot of what Middle Eastern gods is it? Do you know offhand?
I don't know the Middle Eastern gods that the
Like I
planets are.
know the Roman names, I know the Greek
Right.
names. But I can't remember like Nibiru and like all of those other ones when they depict
Right.
it in the Middle Eastern text that
Yeah.
he always refers to.
No, that I'm not quite astute on, my friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my deeper ones that I like to get into every once in a while. Spirit Science, the YouTube page actually does a really good cover of it. I
Okay.
don't know if you ever saw that. Spirit Science. He
The
does
spirit.
like ayahuasca journeys. He does a bunch of different stuff, and then he helps people sound out the ideas of religion, spirituality, and stuff like that. And he does it through cartoons. He's got his own like I don't know avatar, I guess, and his name's Patch, and he's just I don't know I don't know like a stick figure, and he's got a little patch on him, and he explains all these religious and spiritual ideas, and it's kind of like your book, except it's broken down into like 5 minute segments to try to explain little pieces of everything.
Nice. That's really awesome, honestly. Like I do definitely enjoy seeing videos where and I'll watch like shorter videos or even like 20-minute videos, whatever. But yeah, just any videos where people are talking about any spiritual topic, honestly. I'm happy to tune in and just take it all in because I think that that's why we're here. We're here to learn and to discern and to apply. So we're trying to learn all this knowledge and figure out how to carry ourselves and then do it. So yeah.
Do you cover like a higher plane of existence or like an afterlife in your book, um, or
Um,
like your beliefs in that?
I do talk a little bit about spirit journeying, and in spirit journeying and in core shamanism, they do talk about kind of like your map, if you will, like your all your experiences and all the different planes of existence that you operate on, sort of in the shamanic world while you're journeying. So I mean, there's definitely like a shamanic map for each and every different practitioner. Your experiences would be different than mine have been, and so would anybody else's. And in shamanism, your spirits or your journeys are there for you to interpret. They're personal, but I don't. necessarily talk about like a heaven or an afterlife in that way. What I suppose that I'm more focused on with this book is kind of like the living God and Jesus talking about how like the kingdom of heaven is at hand, things of that nature. And I can relate that Jesus saying the kingdom of God is at yeah, the kingdom of God is at hand, to it. It totally resonates with what they say in the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, which is that if we do not have within us the Buddha mind, then where are we to seek the Buddha? So if you don't already possess the knowledge and the wisdom and the enlightenment and the patience and the love and the beauty and the divine grace of a Buddha, then where the hell are you going to find it, buddy?
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah,
I
you got.
just, I think we've talked about it before, that the correlation of like, I don't know, the inner earth or ascension or heaven, all being interchangeable ideas. And I didn't know if you kind of touched on that in the book, because I'm not necessarily trying to pinpoint your beliefs. Like I often wonder what's everybody's motivation for doing good in this world. What is your purpose to do the best version of yourself or be the best version of yourself you can be? And most of it, like for me personally, I think it's reincarnation. Um, I think I think personally, for some reason, that we'll be stuck on this realm until we are a good enough person to excel to a higher plane of existence. Because I don't think heaven is in this existence anymore, in the idea of what people think it is. Like, because I guess I would recognize myself as Christian as well. Um, Not Christian ideologies, but just kind of the ideas of it. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't necessarily think I had to memorize so many Bible verses to understand what God's message was, and what I can interpret from older religions that seem to be source information for me. And it seems like you as well.
Mhm.
Uh, I I just like you do, just try to compose it and try to get an idea. And if I think I'm stuck on this realm and that heaven isn't on this realm, then I have to be the best version of myself to get off of this realm or ascend or whatever to get
Yeah.
to, you know, the
So
divine light.
in that way, I mean, what you're saying sounds a whole lot like the Wheel of Samsara and rebirth with reincarnation, and how as we live through life, we acquire karma, good karma, bad karma, and that
Mhm.
affects our next life.
And
And
we were talking about this offline, but that's what got me into my Wiccan studies for a period of time. Was I went into it with bad intentions, really bad intentions, and then I learned the threefold rule, and it's like, oh, okay, you need to be humbled a little bit and realize that there's a balance to this. You can't just go and have ill will towards others and just do whatever you want. That's not what the Wiccan or Wicca, depending on sex, I guess it's sex based. Depending, I think Wicca is for females and Wiccan is for males, or is it vice
no,
versa?
that sounds right.
Okay, because it's the difference between a witch and a warlock, basically. Um, but they're interpreted as like black magic and bad, evil magic in society, but you don't really realize it. And that was my negative influence of why I was interested in it in the beginning. And then I learned more about it, and I was like, oh, okay. They're not all just witches casting spells on people. Like there is there is a balance to it, just like everything else.
Harm none.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's only positive things, and that's why like negative things you can do negative things, but you're risking a lot more than you would think.
Absolutely. In core shamanism and traditional shamanism, like in all across the world, in different tribes and all different cultures, if you started to use your shamanic powers, and if you started to use your magic to harm people, your spirit guides would leave you. They would ditch you. And in traditional like Latin American cultures, if that happened, if a shaman were to become evil, then they had like a life expectancy of like 3 years after that. So no, you don't want to do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at cultures. What's the Wendigo? Do you know what the Wendigo
Oh,
is?
Wendigo, yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
know about the Wendigo spirit. Yeah,
yeah. The idea that
the
they resorted to cannibalism, and that's what turned them into what they are.
exactly.
It's almost like a modern interpretation of a zombie, I would assume.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it
probably
kind
the
of is.
closest analogy I could make without being, rise from the living dead kind of thing.
Right,
It's
because the thing is that the Wendigo it's driven by this hunger that's it's not just like it is kind of sometimes depicted as rotting. It sometimes is depicted as having eaten its own lips out of hunger. And but the thing is that as it eats, it grows, and that's why it is never satiated. It's never full because as it eats, it grows, and that's why they get to be huge and horrifying.
Yeah, but we see those in all kinds of different cultures, and they're all described as different things. And it's like we have these parables put in life in all different cultures, and these are what actually form a lot of our thoughts today. Like even if we don't
Yeah.
know, like
They know
there
that
are these underlining ideas.
yeah, it forms the entire backstory. It's the entire cultural archive that everybody is referencing when we're talking about all these different stories. We're talking about all these archetypes that echo through history. You know.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I know we could talk about this for hours, but getting kind of late on our end, so we got to do this again soon. Don't make me wait a year again.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely I've got some free time on my hands now, so we'll figure it out.
All right, man. I will talk to you soon. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
But yeah, anytime. And
Wow.
thanks everybody for tuning in. And hopefully we'll get a little part two in here sometime soon.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
All right, good. All right, I'll talk to everybody soon. You guys have a good night.